Um, Hello, everyone, all of our audience who are still connecting to the webinar. I will give just 1 more minute to give a chance for everyone to connect and be able to participate from the very beginning. So just a few seconds more till the official opening. I think we can start, and then everyone who still wants to join will join along. Good day, everyone. Добрий день, шановні колеги, шановна аудиторія. My name is Maria Boganos. I lead the Center for Food and Land Use Research at Kyiv School of Economics, who is the organizer of today's webinar, and I will as well be moderating the webinar. I am pleased to welcome everyone who is listening today and will be participating in the webinar. I am extremely honored to also welcome all of the panelists. And before we move to the discussion, I would like to give a very brief introduction of the initiative and research the center has started doing on cooperation between Ukraine and African countries. We have launched this initiative early last year, and it is related to the fact that Ukraine and African countries have quite intense trade relationship, not for the entire continent. In particular, the countries of the Northern Africa are major importers of Ukrainian agri-food commodities, such as wheat, for example. But after doing the research about which Pavlo Martyshev, one of our colleagues, will be also telling today, we have realized that there is much more potential to cooperate between the countries. In July last year, we have organized our first seminar on the topic. We have welcomed to that seminar honorable guests from the Ukrainian agricultural business, as well as from the research of African continent. And one of the main conclusions of the first seminar was that although there is a lot of a potential for trade between the countries, there are as well many challenges, among them the technical challenges such as logistics. On November 28th, we have organized the second seminar, which focused on cooperation between Ukraine and countries from the Northern Africa. As among the speakers of that seminar were Monica Tothova from FAO, as well as representatives from Egypt, Professor, I apologize, so Professor Osama Nasser Eldin, as well as Dr. Dmytro Prihodko from FAO, who is expert on Northern African regions, and as well Pavlo Martyshev, who represented the Ukrainian side. And one of the conclusions from the second seminar was that there is quite a potential for infrastructural projects and technology transfers, in particular exchange of crop production technologies and common irrigation and land reclamation projects. For this seminar, we have invited the professors from three different African countries, as well as one of our own researchers. And I would like now to move to the program of our seminar today and give the word to our first panelist, Dr. Pavlo Martyshev, who is a researcher at KSE Agrocenter, and he will talk for the next minutes about the cooperation options in agriculture between Ukraine and West African countries. Pavlo, the floor is yours.
Okay, do you see the slides?
Yes, you can make it full screen. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the seminar. And today we will talk about some cooperation options between Ukraine and West Africa. Let's start from the short overview of Ukrainian agriculture. First of all, Ukraine is the largest agricultural producer in Europe. It's so-called breadbasket of Europe. And in 2021, the last pre-war year, the production of grains and oilseeds reached more than 100 million tons. Actually, the war severely affected domestic production, and we expect this year only about 70 million tons. And what we should note in the context of trade between Ukraine and Africa, that the war affected mostly meal and wheat production, both in terms of quantity, I mean the land, the contraction of planted areas, the drop of yields, and the deterioration of quality, and the proportion of milling grades in wheat decreased essentially due to the war. Total land area in Ukraine is mostly it's about 43 million hectares, and 30 million hectares of which are arable land with a fertile black soil, chernozem. And the area actually irrigated declined from 2 million hectares to about 0.5 million hectares. And in 2021, total planted areas were almost 30 million hectares, and actually they dropped essentially due to the war. Globally, Ukrainian agri-food sectors plays essential and growing role in global food security, and its contribution to global food security is immense, and Ukraine could feed more than 330 million people. And actually, agriculture is an important element of national economy. In 2021, it took almost 20% of GDP, including upstream and downstream industries. And in 2022, this share decreased to 8% due to the full-scale war. Actually, over the last decade, the share of agriculture in gross value added increased from 8 to 12%. And as of 2021, almost 3 million people were employed in the sector. And this is about 17% of total employment. Crop production in Ukraine showed strong growth over the past 2 decades, and grain production shows stability of wheat and barley output, but growth of corn harvest, and actually corn is a primary crop in Ukraine, and about 84 million tons of grains were harvested in 2021. Unfortunately, the harvest dropped to almost 60 million tons in 2023. Actually, another trend in Ukraine's crop production is strong growth of oilseed production, especially for sunflower, because Ukraine has favorable climate conditions for sunflower. And in 2021, more than 20 million tons of oilseeds were harvested. As of livestock sector, it shows quite mixed dynamics, and actually it's stagnated, especially if we talk about cattle sector. At the same time, we have some stability in the pork industry and quite steady growth and consolidation in the poultry production, because poultry sector is quite concentrated around a few number of large enterprises, and it is highly export oriented. So we see a substantial potential for the poultry production in Ukraine. As for food processing, Ukraine's food processing industry takes around 4% of gross value added. And the main processed food products are animal products, vegetable oils, milk products, and sugar products. Unfortunately, the full-scale war led to essential damages to Ukrainian agriculture, and we can divide these damages into direct damages and indirect losses. The direct damages, the destruction of infrastructure, of assets, it is more than $10 billion. And the main categories of these damages are machinery, inputs, and storage facilities. At the same time, we have essential indirect losses for the sector. They are almost $70 billion, and it's consists mostly from the crop production and also lower output prices for crops. Ukraine is, as I mentioned, a global agricultural exporter, and here we can see the dynamics of agricultural export. And in the last pre-war year, 2021, Ukraine took the 3rd place in corn export, the 5th place in wheat export, and the 1st place in sunflower oil export. Actually, almost 1/2 of global sunflower oil export was from Ukraine. And actually, when we speak about Africa, in 2021, Ukraine exported about 13 million tons of agri-food commodities. It's grain and oil seeds, with worth almost $4 billion dollars to Africa. Nevertheless, the share of West Africa was less than 1% of total Ukraine's agri-food export to Africa. This means that Ukraine is almost not present at the local markets. If we speak about Ukraine's trade with the main West African states, we can start with Nigeria, and Ukraine's export to Nigeria is relatively small and consists mostly from cereals. So we can see the spike in 2021. It is associated with the record crop in Ukraine, and actually Nigeria is interested in Ukraine's wheat, in Ukraine's corn. As well, it has potential to import Ukraine's vegetable oils. As of imports from Nigeria to Ukraine, Nigeria supplied to Ukraine beans, coffee, tea, fruits, and nuts. This potential is also quite high in terms of tropical fruits, in terms of beans and other food products. If we speak about trade between Ukraine and Ghana, food exports from Ukraine to Ghana is much more diversified compared to Nigeria, and it includes sunflower oil, animal products, and edible preparations. And at the same time, Ghana exports to Ukraine mostly cocoa and cocoa preparations. And if we speak about trade with Cote d'Ivoire, Ukraine's export to Cote d'Ivoire increased over the last decade, and the main exporting categories are cereals and vegetable oils. And according to ITC trade map, there is no agri-food export from Cote d'Ivoire to Ukraine. So we can see that this trade is almost unilateral between Ukraine and Cote d'Ivoire. So what are the strong sides of Ukraine's agricultural sector which could shape the structure of Ukraine's agricultural exports? First of all, Ukraine still has strong potential of agricultural production due to favorable natural conditions and unfilled yield gaps compared to benchmarks from other countries, from the EU, for example. And grains and oilseeds harvest can exceed 150 million tons in the nearest decades, and the fast-growing sector of agricultural technologies in Ukraine could boost also in the nearest future. I mean, drones, machinery, systems of precise farming, and I talked with guys from drone industry, and they said that drones production could increase several times over the next decade. So Ukraine is not only the global supplier of agricultural commodities, but also it has strong potential in agri-tech industry. Yes. So also Ukrainian products are highly competitive on the global market despite quite moderate level of state support. And our level of state support is maybe comparable to Brazil, so where there is no essential subsidies to agriculture, but we are quite a strong player on the global markets. And Ukraine's wheat is one of the cheapest in the MENA region. Corn is highly competitive on the EU and Chinese markets. And sunflower oil is delivered to Asian market, mostly to India and China. So at the same time, Ukraine's agriculture is gradually synchronized with the EU quality and safety standards. For example, Ukraine continues to comply with farm-to-fork strategy and aiming to make food system fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly. And we can speak about the more closer integration between European and Ukrainian agricultural markets in the nearest future. At the same, we can see some institutional shifts which which are supported by modern information tools. For example, State Agrarian Register for administration of state support in Ukraine, and some services of State Geocadastre for administration of land resources are aligned with the EU directives on agricultural support. And also Ukraine has a strong scientific base in some sectors, despite the quite low and quite poor level of state financing. For example, crop selection, we have some selection for wheat, for example, or groundwater sources development. And we see some the network of research enterprises, for example, from the National Academy of Agrarian Sciences of Ukraine. And this could boost the state-private cooperation between these enterprises and agribusiness. So what are the cooperation options in between West African countries and Ukraine? We see three main streams, and they are actually quite distinctive from the cooperation streams with North Africa, for example, because North Africa is focused mostly on irrigation, and West Africa, it is not so suffered from the water deficit compared to North Africa. So the first stream is agri-food exports to West Africa, and the main categories are grains, both wheat and corn, vegetable oils, particularly sunflower oil or soybean oil, poultry meat, because we have seen some interesting trends in livestock sector in West Africa, and West African population consume a lot of game meat. Also, Ukraine could provide seeds for wheat and corn varieties, processed food products, and specialized nutritious foods within the VFP program. And actually, the supply of such foods are aligned with the VFP agenda for the Western Africa, and it helps to mitigate undernutrition in the region. The second stream is the development of infrastructure. First of all, it's about silos for grain and as well as cold storage capacities. It could help to reduce post-harvest losses. And the second priority here could be some common projects in irrigation. Particularly, we know about some programs of fostering rice production in Nigeria or corn production in Nigeria, and the irrigation, I suppose, is quite important here. The third stream is extension services and consultations in agronomy. The main focus is corn production in Nigeria because Ukraine has a good expertise in corn production. Also, its supply of drones of precision farming systems, which are very developed in Ukraine and has essential potential here. And the third is education programs, I mean agricultural extension services and other programs. And for the summary, a couple of remarks. The potential of trade and non-trade cooperation between Ukraine and West African countries is almost untapped, because less than 1% of Ukraine's agri-food exports to Africa comes to Western Africa. The second is the current tensions in the Middle East and in the Red Sea region could reorient grain flows from Ukraine to Western Africa, and we see some evidences of it among our traders. The third is that relations in agriculture between Ukraine and West Africa could be extensively intermediated by two trends. First is Ukraine accession to the EU, because actually EU and West Africa are trade cluster. Recently, I some investigated trade clusters of agricultural trade globally, and we see some intensive trade between the EU and the West African region. And the second is the further integration of African markets within the African free continental trade area also will boost the trade between Ukraine and the region. So this is the main distinction between cooperation with North Africa, for example, and Western Africa. Cooperation with Western Africa could be highly intermediated by the EU in the context of Ukraine's accession to the EU. That's all, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pavlo. This was an excellent discussion starter with quite a few interesting and I think not everyone thought of points, especially on agri-tech from Ukraine. I would like to remind our audience that today's webinar is being recorded, and you can post your questions either in the chat or in the Q&A session. And at the end of the presentations, I will voice your questions from the chat and the Q&A, unless they have already been answered by our esteemed speakers. There was already one of the general questions in the chat asking about the materials, and I would like to repeat that upon the permission of our speakers, the materials will be posted on our webpage. And now I would like to move to the views and presentations of our colleagues from Western Africa. Let us see what they have to say on the topic. And the next speaker is Professor Abiodun Bankole from the Economics Department of the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. And according to my program, the topic of his presentation is the development of Nigerian agri-food sector. Please, Professor Bankole, the floor is yours. And in case you have prepared slides, you can share them with
Thank you, Maria.
button.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Pablo, for your presentation. Your presentation really shows that West Africa, and in particular Nigeria, has a lot to do in agriculture. Even though we have this wide expanse of land, we are not cultivating as we should be, partly due to policy failures and so on and so forth. But let me just share my slides. Okay. Let me go back and do something before I share it. I need to show screen. Guys. Sorry.
You can share the screen, yes? Great. Thank you.
Okay, this is what I wanted to achieve. Thank you. This is, can I remove this? Okay, so agriculture. Nigeria's agriculture sector, we have the 4 basic subsectors: crop production, livestock, forestry, and fishing. And because our production methods have been rudimentary in terms of technology use in that sector, we find that the most prominent of our culture is crop production. And our livestock follows at a distance in terms of the share of each sector in total agricultural sector. And livestock is just about 6 to 7%. Forestry is just 1%, and fishing is 2%, even though we're trying to also encourage aquaculture recently. Now, in terms of the trends, we saw that coming from before independence, the country is largely agrarian. In other words, you have little industry and service sector. And in that era, what we found is we were the highest exporter of palm oil or palm produce. I talk about oil or the kernel, and they were the second largest producer in cocoa, and then third in groundnut. The graph you have there is that agriculture is only slightly above manufacturing in terms of trends of the GDP production, the GDP, and you have services being the sector that has the highest share. Agriculture remains the mainstay of the economy, provides food for the growing population, provides raw materials for insignificant industry. You see that even the industrial production is low. And despite that, it provides huge unemployment opportunity for our expanding labor force. And agriculture is also a source of revenue and foreign exchange for the individuals, the citizens, and the government. Since we have discovered oil in commercial quantity, and we have exported oil in 1958, we have gone into the problem of Dutch disease syndrome because the economy has neglected the agricultural sector because of the quantum of resources that is coming from the oil sector. In fact, every problem in Nigeria today can be traced to that discovery of oil in commercial quantity. Even then, agriculture still provides around 25% of our production. And because of what had happened due to the Dutch disease, what we have found is that the employment in agriculture, which used to be about 70%, has declined over time. And you can also see that in the graph, employment in agriculture compared to employment in industry and services. You see that for agriculture, it is the one that has now significantly fallen over time. So as of 2022, employment in agriculture is just about 37.9%. And despite that, agriculture provides important earning opportunities for our labor force, especially those in the rural area. So when you look at the way we produce agriculture, in Nigeria, it is still mostly subsistence because it is smallholder farmers that are doing the larger proportion of agriculture. We don't have so much mechanized farming. And because of that, we have about 80% of the Nigerian farmers, they are smallholder farmers, okay? And because of that also, we find that 90% of the cultivated land are in the hands of small-scale farmers. So when we go to to look at development in trade, agricultural trade, what we find is that agricultural share of merchandise trade is relatively small because of the domineering role of crude oil exports. And you can see that in the graph. I'm trying to see, okay, minimize this. Okay, so you see that even in the period between 1981 to 2022, you can see the import and exports of agricultural trade on the graph. And the summary of that is that it is small. It is the oil exports that is predominant. And when you look at the composition of the agricultural exports that Nigeria had sent out of the country to other countries, we see that it's made up of majorly sesame seed, cashew nuts, cocoa beans, ginger, frozen shrimp, and cotton. And sesame, cashew nuts, and cocoa, they are the most dominant when you look at their proportion in the export of agricultural goods or agricultural commodities. In terms of imports, Nigeria's main agricultural imports are wheat, sugar, fish, and milk. With wheat is the most dominant when you look at what Nigeria buys of agricultural goods from abroad. So you then find that when you put export of agricultural commodities against the imports, you find that Nigeria remains a net food importer, And what that means is that, in fact, right now, Nigeria has a crisis in food price inflation because of developments around the rest of the world. And the Nigeria account, we have a cultural trade deficit according to the data. And that is also being felt in the rank and file of the population because food inflation now is over 30%. And it's also driving the rest of the inflationary pressures in the country. Okay, so it is not as if government has not directed policies at the sector. And if you look at here, we find a lot of interventions that government had made in the past. From 1970 to date, we have a natural asset production program, abstract development programs, where you have in each region, you have some farms related, and then you have the nationwide Operation Feed the Nation, Green Revolution, all of that. So Nigeria is not short of all these policies, but these policies have not translated into a large agricultural production that will spill over to a large export. So when you look at each of those programs, and then you want to look at why they fail.
I think we have lost the connection a bit.
That is lacking. And then we have Operation Feed the Nation corruption because resources meant for the program were diverted and mismanaged. And during the revolution, we have too much emphasis on large-scale mechanized farming, and small-scale farmers were sort of sidelined. At the end of the day, both were not able to, were not realizable. So and so on and so forth. Even the most recent agricultural transformation agenda between 2016 and 2020 is the one that we're still following. We have a new government in place, which has not really come out with a different agricultural agenda. But these ones that we are following, we find that some of the problems that we have mentioned in the past, they are still there. And sometimes funds were earmarked and given, and they are not given to targeted beneficiaries. So we have these problems with developing the agricultural sector. Now, lately, we have a new phenomenon which is a violent conflict. It's not really new, but what is new about it is that now this conflict is now so large and so severe, so strong, that farmers have now run away from the farms, because in the first place they are smallholder farmers, and then when those smallholder farmers are now faced with attacks from bandits, and some of them are kidnapped, and so on and so forth, what you find is that those farmers, they are look from the farms, and it's also part of what is causing the food inflation or rising food prices, apart from the issue of climate change, flooding, droughts. And the important thing about this meeting is that it is being organized by the center in Ukraine, because the Russia-Ukraine war is also affecting the food supply in Nigeria. So these are the point that I have to make. But if you look at what impact has agricultural sector made on Nigeria's economy over time, even though the findings are mixed, but in terms of livelihoods, in terms of the opportunities for such livelihoods, for social capital, and even provision of food. We said, I just said that Nigeria is a net importer, but there's some that's 24% of our GDP is from agriculture, and that also contributes to that's Nigeria's economic growth. So I think that's okay. Going to conclusion now, is that successive governments have continued to emphasize agricultural sector development to diversify the economy from the oil, which is now the elephant in the room for Nigeria. But despite those efforts, because of those problems that we have identified, corruption, not targeting interventions, and diversion of resources, and so on and so forth, we find that Nigeria still experiences food insecurity. Okay, and then it has to import a significant amount of its food, and sector. So those are the challenges that any new partnership will also have to help Nigeria to resolve. So in terms of recommendation, we're talking about focusing on taking advantage of the value chain in the agri sector, right from the seedling points to financing to even developing markets overseas. Okay, value chain in cassava, cashew nuts, and a whole other pineapple and so on. They need to be significantly developed so that Nigeria can also benefit from its agricultural production and from any partnership that it wishes to develop. So it shouldn't just be export import. In fact, in terms of, I saw what's presented by Pablo, and you will see that it's possible for Nigeria to benefit from the mechanized parts, the services, providing services parts. In particular, I mean, Ukraine is a highly developed agricultural sector in Europe. Has a very developed sector in Europe, and that can be exported to Nigeria in terms of foreign direct investments in the country. I guess that's where I'm stopping. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Bancoli. There is a lot to think about. I especially admired the list of the commodities in which Nigeria has natural endowments and the potential to grow and benefit in its agricultural sector. At this point, again, I'm reminding the audience that you can post your questions either in the chat or in the Q&A session. And I would like to invite to the floor our next speaker, whose name is Dr. Yo Osei Asare. He's a professor at the Agricultural Economics and Agribusiness Department at the University of Ghana, and he will present the challenges of Ghanaian agri-food sector. Professor Osei Asare, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, and I hope you can hear.
Yes, we can hear you very well, and we are seeing your slides.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much once again. My name is Yao Osei Asare, and I am with the Agricultural Business Department of the University of Ghana. And I'm talking about the Ghana's agri-food system and the challenges we currently face. So this is the outline of what I intend to present, a brief overview of Ghana so that others would appreciate what is going on. What is that? And then I zoom in to the main challenges, and then I give a concluding or my concluding remarks. So, and the land size is approximately 238,000 square kilometers. We are rich in natural resources. Popular ones are gold, timber, diamonds, thin administrative regions, and our projected current population is about 34.4 people. The inflation rate in Ghana is around 23.2% year-on-year as at February this year. And our GDP composition, agriculture contributes about 21%. Industry contributes more, that's about 34%. And then the services sector contributes about 45%. And these are based on 2020 figures. So it tells you that provides the highest contributor to GDP. Agric is the least. Then with the agri-food system, we have the on-farm agri-food system and then the off-farm. And with the on-farm, which is purely the primary production, the on-farm contributes about 18.5% to our GDP growth, whilst the off-farm, that is apart from the primary production, all the aspects of the aggregation, processing, 10% contribution to our GDP growth. So let me skip this slide that talks about what agri-food system is, but generally from input acquisition to primary production to processing, storage, post-harvest handling, transportation, marketing, distribution, disposal, and also consumption of these food products. That is basically what the agri-food system is about. So we are talking about everything concerning agriculture, from what we often call from farm to fork. That is the issue here. So broadly, 4 subsystems can be identified: the agricultural production, food storage and transport, food transformations, and then the food retail subsystem. And basically, they all gear towards giving the economy food and nutrition security, so that as current generations benefit, the future will not be disadvantaged. So now, what are our problems in this, our agri-food system in Ghana? So I'm looking at 3 aspects: the upstream production sector, that is the primary production of agricultural products. A major problem we are still faced today is low productivity. And honestly, this issue of low productivity dates so back to 1957, when Ghana became independent. it is still the same issue, low productivity. And the slow rate of technology adoption and soil fertility challenges are still a major problem. Only about 5% of our farmers use hybrid seeds. And the varieties that they have, these are challenges. Fertilizer application in West is generally low, and Ghana is one of the lowest, where we apply about 13 kilograms per hectare. We have low application of fertilizers. The other part is limited access to productive resources, especially with our raw smallholder farmers. Credit becomes a major constraint for them. We still overly depend on rain-fed agriculture. So we are depending on the rains, natural rains. And data suggests that only about 3.2% of land that is cultivated is irrigated. So irrigation is not much for us, only about 3.2% of all irrigated. And provision of mechanization services is woefully inadequate. It's a huge problem. Actually, our smallholder farmers actually queue. They are waiting in line to be served. And mainly it is about tractor plowing services. A tractor with a plow to plow the land for them. They queue for it. Maintenance, spare parts are all challenges we are currently facing. Then we also have an issue of inadequate promotion of the production of nutritious local or traditional foodstuff. So we are not promoting our own local production. We hardly do that. We are also experiencing environmental resilience challenges. And I think this is quite global, but ours is quite severe. We are very much vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And as I alluded earlier, we still depend on rainfall with little irrigation. And this vulnerability actually doesn't cut across equally. The northern part of Ghana is more severe than the southern part. And it appears we are not really ready to combat climate change effects. We do quite a lot of lip service, we talk, but the actions are not really coming as expected. And there is a slow pace of sustainable agricultural intensification. The pace is so slow, and it is largely because the resource-poor farmers cannot afford to do that. Another broad area is the unsustainable production practices. Our practices are unsustainable. They degrade the environment, they pollute the environment, and that comes with some hidden costs. We have huge emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, estimated around 9.7 metric tons of CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions. All these are challenges we are going through. And the focus on the use of sustainable agricultural practices is still a challenge. It is being talked about anyway, but on the ground, practically going down to the farmers, the message or the implementation is very, very limited. Infrastructure is still a problem. Poor infrastructure, the road network, the processing capacity is not there when commodities are produced. If they are processed, at least it helps to preserve or provide long shelf life. But that aspect is a limitation for us. And it is leading to about 20% of food loss. In other words, storage facilities, appropriate ones are not there. So we produce and 20% is lost. And this leads to high costs for our farmers. And ultimately, you will find prices rising. And that is a challenge. And still with the upstream production sector, we have wide discrepancies in food commodity prices. For example, the farm gate where the commodities produce, that path from farm gate to the wholesale, farm gate price and wholesale price, the gap is about 169%, very huge. So it's either telling you that if, the infrastructure is poor, so price is transmitted from the farm gate to where it is, to where we have the wholesale. We have challenges in the system actually. Post-harvest challenges still exist. For cereals in particular, we are experiencing about 20% food loss, as I said earlier. And for horticultural crops, it's even higher, to as much as 35% of wastage. Food is lost. Another contributor to our challenges is the high levels of poverty. The farmers who are the ones cultivating, there's high levels of poverty. It cuts across the entire country. About 27% as of 2020 live below the poverty line. There is also a high cost of production. And because of this high cost, inputs are expensive to purchase. So farmers naturally would not even apply those recommended inputs to experience high productivity. That is something we have to overcome. So you realize that with the low productivity, Ghanaian products are less competitive to imported ones. So the imports actually come into Ghana and they are even cheaper than what we produce locally here. And all because our cost of production is very high. Infrastructure, as I think I said earlier, is a huge one. We have very poor road network, very poor vehicles, appropriate vehicles to convey food commodities from the production point to the centers. Storage facilities, distribution facilities are also very poor. In some regions, they are non-existent. So we can say that the supply chain actually lacks the needed and adequate infrastructure to operate. And because of some of these challenges, it has resulted in another challenge where we depend a lot on food imports, a lot of food imports. And similar to what my colleague from Nigeria talked about, we depend so much on imports for these very commodities. Rice, the rice mainly comes from the Asian countries. Wheat, also from Ukraine, and the current war between Ukraine and Russia affected Ghana. At a point, even we getting bread to purchase was a challenge for us. The next is poultry meat, soya beans, and that one, some come from the US, some also from Ukraine, especially the sunflower oils. They are imported from Ukraine. And then tomato products, mainly from Italy. So we are so much dependent on the imports of these commodities. And because of the absence of food safety compliance or low quality standards, our doors are open and we import much. But at the local level, here in Ghana, there are barriers to one entering the urban food markets. There are more or less some cartels, especially the market women that we call the market queens. They have formed a cartel, so to enter that market to also operate, you have some barriers you must overcome before you are admitted to trade in those markets. Logistics, a big challenge. And we observe clearly that in terms of the quality of imports, for example, rice, you clearly observe that the imported rice has a better quality than the locally produced ones. And as a lot of people say, Ghanaians have good taste. So you will realize that more people would demand the imported rice. One, it is of good quality. Two, it is cheaper than the locally produced ones. Then for some commodities, not only the cereals, but especially the non-cereals, we realize that the imports are cheap and they are also unhealthy. They are generally unhealthy, but the imports will come in. Processing challenges are everywhere. Our food retailers do not adhere to safe practices, and that results in microbial contamination and foodborne diseases. We still have our packaging of food items is also not the best. We utilize a lot of polythene to package, and it is causing a menace, environmental problems. Also within the processing and distribution subsector, infrastructure is still a challenge. We find that a lot of the farm produce are chemicalized. That's the name we use. For example, a farmer may decide to spray the pineapple farm, but they don't adhere to the protocols where you have to ensure that some number of days must pass before it is sold to the consumer, but they don't do that. They spray today, tomorrow they are selling. So that is a challenge. I have personally encountered that, and I was actually admitted at the hospital, so a lot of contaminations. Our food chains are fragmented. And then there is the absence of food-based dietary guidelines for the citizenry. Standards, some are existing, but they are not really adhered to. So on the books, you find some guidelines, but the implementation is not enforced. We also have what we call food fraud, where you find the food commodity being adulterated. In other words, they add unapproved chemicals to it. They dilute it. They tamper with the food in so many ways. So what you see out there doesn't reflect the actual food item. For example, palm oil. Consumers expect it to be so red. So when they produce and it's not that color, they add their own additives, colors to make it very red. And that contaminates the food. These practices are a huge challenge along the processing pathway. And generally, there is low nutrition literacy. We don't really know much about enjoying good nutrition food. And that is another area where education is very important. We have poor regulation of our foods that are produced. Farmers do anything they want. Standards are so low. Diet quality and nutrition security is a challenge. And currently, about 21% of population are nutrition insecure. And about 65% cannot afford healthy diets in Ghana. About 65%. And we are seeing increasing trends of overweight and obesity among the Ghanaian population. And that is around 29% of the population are being overweight and obese. Consumption of unhealthy food is increasing, and this is also as a result of the rate of urbanization. The rate of urbanization, and somehow, compared to the past, incomes are rising. So consumers are demanding for fast foods. And that is also leading to non-communicable diseases. When it comes to the consumption dimension, we are experiencing large nutritional discrepancies among the regions in Ghana. While some areas are food secure, relatively food secure, others are experiencing huge health issues, which is related to food. Stunting rates are higher in the northern part of Ghana, and it's because of their low diet quality that lacks micro and macronutrients. And as I said earlier, it is of a high cost for the population to actually choose healthy diets. That's a huge problem. We've also observed that the food environment and generally consumer behavior is rapidly changing, and we are shifting towards access to unhealthy foods and drinks, especially in the urban area. That is an area of concern. And somehow it is also because of insufficient production of these nutrient-rich crops. So that experience is really gaining inroads. Because of poverty, we find that affordability is a huge problem for individuals to purchase. And then there is limited focus on ensuring that we have affordable, nutritious foods. That is a challenge for the government. Then the issue of policy constraint that we find. The agri-food system, as the name suggests, must be a system that must be holistic. So there is a lack of that systems approach that links production, processing, distribution, and the consumption of food in general. That is something lacking. So my concluding remarks on this brief presentation is that our agri-food system challenges are huge, and it dates back since 1957. It's been same. If there is any progress, it's very minimal later. And the weak systems that we find is not helping us to improve on our agri-food system. The systems are weak, and there is also the issue of the political will of the state. There's the issue of appropriate technology, and I'm glad to hear that Ukraine has advanced in the use of drones and all that. Even though it's gradually catching up in Ghana, I think that more is, needed. Yes, more is needed, especially making it affordable to the ordinary farmer. And another dimension is appropriate funding, because funding is a challenge. Our banks, financial institutions always will tell you that farmers are risky. So there is that product must be developed for supporting the group of farmers we have. So we see these as important enablers for the agri-food system to succeed. So on this note, I want to end here, and I say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yal Oseyasare. I think access to finance, this is something Ukrainian agricultural producers before the war and during the war can relate to. However, we will move to the discussion after our last presentation. I see that there are a few questions already popped up in our chats. However, I would like to ask you for your patience as we have another speaker today. This is Dr. Doucouré Charles. He represents Educational and Teaching Department of ENSEA at Cote d'Ivoire. And his presentation today is Agricultural Production and Food Security in Cote d'Ivoire. Dr. Doucouré, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So let me...
Dr. Yao, could you please stop sharing your screen?
Okay, thank you very much. I just forgot.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
No problem. Now, Dr. Charles, I think you can share your screen if you have the slides.
Yes. I have a slide. So, do you have my screen?
We didn't yet see the slides.
It's okay?
No, I have a message here that you started screen sharing, but the slides are not there yet. Maybe
I will try again.
just check your sharing options.
Try again, please.
There must be a few options to choose either slides or the whole screen. You can choose the PowerPoint.
Is it okay now?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. Yes, thank you. My name is Doucouré Charles, and I'm lecturer researcher at it's a training center statistic in Abidjan, NCA, National Training Statistic for master degrees. So my presentation will be on the topic agricultural production and food security in Cote d'Ivoire. And I will share with you these points, a general overview on Cote d'Ivoire agricultural sector with a focus on the importance of agricultural production. The second point will be the food balance statement in Cote d'Ivoire on 2021 to see what's the great balance and what can be the opportunities for any kind of cooperation and which product will be suitable for this cooperation eventually. And the third point is challenges facing by the agricultural sector for food security in Cote d'Ivoire. And the fourth point is government initiative to promote agricultural development regard to achieve this objective of food securities. And then the following is strategies undertaken by all policymakers to improve food securities in Cote d'Ivoire before concluding and giving some points to take away. So, according to the overview of agricultural sector, as for you have learned from the previous presentation, agricultural sectors in Cote d'Ivoire also constitute one of the pillars of the economy. More than 55% of the GDP coming from this sector, and also more than 50% of the active population work in these sectors, and the land available land used by agricultural activities is around 60%. So in Cote d'Ivoire, agricultural concern industrial and export crops, what we will call in this presentation non-subsistence agriculture, as well as food crops, to make the difference between these two kinds of production and stress on what we we call subsistence agriculture to focus on food security. The non-subsistence agricultural sector in Cote d'Ivoire encompasses a wide range of activities, including the cultivation of various crops, livestock, rearing, and forestry. These sectors not only contribute to the country's export income, but also provides employment opportunity for a significant portion of the population. In this,
your slide
yes,
is not moving. Your
oh,
PowerPoint slide is not moving. So kindly put it in presentation mode. It's not moving. It's still on the title page.
okay. Let me do it again because on my screen, it's okay.
Yes, we can see the slide now.
Okay. On the presentation mode or?
It's not the presentation mode, but I think the slide number 5 is the one you...
Yes. Can I move on or?
I think yes. Yes, you can move
Okay.
on. Just remember to change the slides. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the non-subsistence agriculture sector in Cote d'Ivoire encompasses a wide range of activities. It includes activities like agriculture of exports, like coffee and cocoa, cotton, cashew, oilseed, rubber, and sugar cane. The subsistence agricultural sectors play a significant role in the country's economic and food security. This is the part of the presentation on which we will stress on according to the topic food securities. So in this subsector, we can notice major crops like corn, rice, yam, cassava, plantain, maize, and also millet, sorghum, fonio, peanuts, sweet potatoes, and so on. And these sectors is very characterized by the fact that it constitutes a subsistence for the total population. And then we can see the importance of agricultural production. For example, this importance goes beyond food securities only because it can also has a relationship with economic stability and social welfare. When talking about food securities, importance of agricultural production is with a rapidly growing population, it's necessary to ensure food securities as a priority. And this is one of the goals of policymakers in Cote d'Ivoire. So the agricultural production of staple crops and essential food items remain crucial in providing a stable food supply for the nation. When talking about economic stability, agricultural production not only supports food security, but also contributes to the overall economic stability of the country. It generates income, creates employment opportunity, and drives rural development. And talking about social welfare, this agricultural production with the ability of locally produced food enhances the social welfare of the population, reducing dependency of imports and ensuring access to affordable and nutritious food options. So what is exactly the problematic when talking about agricultural production and food securities? In this presentation, the main question is it possible in the situation of Cote d'Ivoire, relying on the subsectors of subsistence agriculture to make possible to reach the goal of food security? Specifically, what is the state of food production for food securities in Cote d'Ivoire? And then what are the sector's challenges in achieving these goals? And lastly, what are strategies implemented for improving food securities in Cote d'Ivoire? According to the first question, the state of the balanced food in Cote d'Ivoire, we rely on a specific indicator called import dependency rate, looking at least the total balance of food in Cote d'Ivoire on 2021. This indicator expresses the importance of import concerning domestic uses. And looking at the main 2 points, plants and animals, we will focus priority on plants. This graph shows the import dependency rate in percentage in 2021 according to 9 speculation on product growth plants. We can see that the 4 major growth plants are cereal, sugar, alcoholic beverage, and vegetable. They have an indicator level at least over than 10% on this year, 2021. So when focused on this group of products, what are the specific products which can be showed as opportunities for eventually cooperation with another country like Ukraine? Moving to the first group is the cereal group of products. We can see on wheat and derived products, oats and derived products, and other cereal and rice can be written as opportunities to create some cooperation on agricultural sector to reach the goal of food security according to this group of products. Moving to the sugar and sweetness, we can return sweetness principally and sugar raw equivalents to be a good opportunity for cooperation in agricultural production. What about the alcoholic beverage and vegetable? According to alcoholic beverage, we can see that non-food alcohol and alcoholic beverage at whole and wine can be a great opportunity to cooperate with Ukraine in reaching this goal of food securities. And then the last subset of agricultural products is vegetable, like tomatoes and derived products and other vegetable. We use the general nomenclature of presenting these agricultural food products according to the statistic of Ministry in charge of agricultural product in Cote d'Ivoire. So we can see that to reach food security's objectives, we can stress on this, the fact that import dependency rates give to what extent agricultural food securities depends majority to imports. So cereal, beer, sugar, alcoholic beverage, and vegetable could be an opportunity to create cooperation in agricultural production and food security. What about specific meat products? Here we stress on plant, but when we take meat products, we can see that in poultry, pork meat and sheep and goat meat also, we can have some opportunities to cooperate and reach the goal of food security in Cote d'Ivoire. According to these opportunities and knowing that these food securities remain a challenge, remain a concern in Cote d'Ivoire, what are the challenges facing this agricultural sector's production for food securities? We retain 3 main challenges: climate vulnerability, market instability, and infrastructure limitation. According to climate vulnerability, the agricultural sector in Cote d'Ivoire is vulnerable to erratic weather patterns, including drought and heavy rainfall impacting crop yields. For market instability, fluctuating market prices and international trade dynamic pose challenges for the agricultural industry and the livelihoods of farmers. When talking about infrastructure limitation, we notice that one of the great challenges is the insufficient access to modern farming technologies and inadequate transport infrastructure hinder agricultural productivity and distribution across all the population. What about the government initiative to promote agricultural development facing all these challenges and regarding the goal of food securities? These initiatives has three pillars: investments, educational program, and policy reform. According to investments, government has implemented strategic investment to modernize agricultural practices and improve the overall productivity of the sector. And regarding the educational program, there are programs aimed at educating and training farmers in sustainable agricultural techniques to enhance their yield and income opportunities. Because in general speaking, we have to grow all production, agricultural production, only by extending the surface without growing productivity after improving the yield. And lastly, policy reform. Reform and policies to address market challenges, support small-scale farmers, and enhance agricultural resilience to climate change as also taken by policymakers. What about strategies for improving food securities in Cote d'Ivoire specifically? These strategies has three axes mainly: increasing agricultural productivities, diversifying crop, and empowering community. According to increase agricultural productivities, governments work to implement measures to enhance crop yields and production efficiency to meet a growing demand for food, because there is a great deficit on the main agricultural production which are taken into account when talking about food securities. And these main crops are rice, yam, and so on, as we said before. And according crop diversification, the strategy is mainly to promote the cultivation of a diverse range of crops to ensure resilience and in the face of climate variability. This diversification can tackle the issue when we see the climate change is the main challenges facing this agricultural production. And community empowerment. Engaging local community, as we know that most of agricultural which are working in this sector are in rural areas. So engaging local communities in sustainable agricultural practices and providing access to resources like financial resources and materials and technical practices just to enhance their yield and grow also productivity to reach the total production better to be adequate with the demand for consumption. So to conclude, when we talk about food securities and agricultural production in Cote d'Ivoire, we know that subsistence agriculture is the main pillar to reach these goals. And food security remains a concern as local plant production does not yet allow to reach the goal of food securities. And the main challenges are, for example, addressing market instability and reach some infrastructure to be very adequate to enhance productivity in these sectors. And facing these challenges, government has some initiative like policies to support farmers and undertake some investment in agricultural sector, like financing educational program, financing and acquisition of technical uses of materials for little farmers, and so on. So agricultural production and food security in Cote d'Ivoire remain a concern, and facing these challenges, government have implemented some political, and we can discuss specifically after if there is some question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Charles. The presentation was excellent. It was very interesting. I would like now to officially open our discussion session. And I see that we have a few questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So let's start from those questions. So the audience asks to some of the professors from Africa, how do you use waste from the cities? Does it go to fertilizers recycling or just goes to waste? Can Ukraine start to export fertilizers to Africa to start to change the soil consistency? Who would like to take this question? Okay. Maybe I could try to start the discussion a little bit. Ukraine is currently struggling with supplying the fertilizers to its own agricultural producers, because some of our factories that produced fertilizers have been destroyed. Historically, Ukraine has been dependent on the import from Russia and Belarus. Now this is not the case anymore, and our producers have been facing very high prices and availability challenges for the fertilizers. So overall, it could be quite challenging for Ukraine to become a fertilizer exporter in the near future. Let's move then, and also for Ukraine regarding the waste waste processing. I guess audience member asked about organic waste. First of all, for example, in Ukraine, there is no government decree or law that obliges the citizens to separate their waste, especially between organic and other types. There are private initiatives where you can recycle plastic and glass and metal, of course, but this is not obligatory. Hence, organic waste from the cities in Ukraine is just waste. Some of the private farmers create their own small waste, organic waste processing facilities to actually use it, the waste then for their fields, but this is a very rare initiative. So overall, for Ukraine, the question is, this is so far, this option so far is in the future. Let's move to another question, which was addressed to Dr. Osei Asare, and it says, why is the wedge between the farm sale and wholesale so huge? I remember from the slide, it was 169%. What is done on the private and governmental sides to close the gap? If Dr. Asare can hear us, yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. I have attempted responding by typing my response there, but I can still talk about it here. Yes, the problem are multifold. Why that huge gap? The first is that the wholesalers or the traders who go to the farm gate actually dictate the price at which they want to purchase those commodities. Because the agricultural commodities, they are quite perishable. Storage facilities are not so much available. So the farmer who is resource poor immediately after harvesting cannot even afford to store. They need their money back to feed their farm family. So the traders go in there knowing the situation of this farmer, decide to dictate the price. So they get it cheaper. And then the trader who brings it to the farm gate has two issues. Transportation cost is huge for them because the road, the feeder road, the nature of the road is bad and it's so worse in the rainy season. It gets so bad in the rainy season. So transporting the commodity from the farming areas to the towns and cities is very expensive. So once roads are bad, the transport owners charge high prices. Fuel is also increasing. It got worse when the Ukraine-Russia conflict emerged. So fuel prices also go up. To all contribute to the cost of moving the produce from the farm to the wholesale. So it makes the price shoot up. And the last part is this: the trader, they decide how much profit margin they want to put on the commodity. We don't have any regulation here to determine the profit margins on somebody, a business person can make, and how much. So this trader, after all these, will now decide that I want to make a 50% profit margin, 60%, and they choose to slap that percentage margin on their commodity. So these are contributory factors why there's a huge gap between the farm gate and then the wholesale level. They are so clear here in Ghana. And also, there isn't much information flow, market information flow to know the price differences between the farm gate and a nearby city. So gradually, information is being provided on farm gate prices, retail prices in different cities, farming communities, so that the farmers can take advantage to decide where they would want to go and sell. Even with that information, it is another challenge transporting all your maize or your corn, transporting all your millet to another community to sell. If all doesn't sell, you have the responsibility of bringing it back to your farm gate. So these are factors that contribute to that huge gap. And the situation is not getting better simply because cost of inputs are rising. Fuel cost is rising. So the situation seems not to be getting better. And there is no control over how much the businesswoman or the businessman or the trader decides to put on his or her commodity to make profits. So these are some of the challenges identified. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to encourage other speakers also to raise their hands or just comment on the topics or on the questions whenever you feel like you could add anything. If currently there is nothing to add on the logistics, there is one more question from the audience to Professor Asare. What can be done to encourage import substitution in light of high production costs?
Thank you very much. Here again, I've tried to respond to in the chat, but let me give another here again. That is one area that the government has been trying over the years to do import substitution so that costs of production would be minimized. That is the idea. So, for example, farmers are not using fertilizers because the import bill is huge. Often utilize a private sector and they import from Ukraine and other places. So, if such a manufacturing plant is established here in Ghana, I believe the cost of imports, freight, and all that would be minimized or removed. So it's produced in the country. I believe that all things being equal, the difference in transportation costs, freight, and all that, taxes would not be there. So, a good strategy to really do import substitution is to have some of these products really manufactured in the country. And we have our doors open to collaborate, actually, So that could be one way to reduce the high production costs that farmers are facing. Almost everything used in agricultural production is imported into Ghana. Almost everything. The only area we are trying harder is the use of manure, waste products, agricultural waste at the local level, farmer level, and also with some of the private sector companies. They are utilizing the waste and converting them into manure. And it is mainly the farmers who are involved in horticultural crop production are the ones who patronize the waste. Production of vegetables, they are the ones who normally utilize the manure, organic manure produced from the waste, household waste and agricultural waste. So otherwise, everything is imported, everything. So if we can have these production lines here in Ghana, it could reduce the cost of production. It could reduce the cost of production substantially. Yes.
Okay, thank you for this answer. In case the panelists have been wondering, should be an option to raise your hand in your lower panel of the Zoom under the More option, 3 dots. I have as well noticed that our colleague, Professor Oleg Nivievsky, has joined the panel. He's one of the most known experts in agricultural economics and agriculture of Ukraine. So in case Professor Nivievsky would like to add something, also please feel free to add to the discussion.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Maria, and thanks a lot to everybody for interesting discussion and for presentation. No, I mean, I would just to follow up on the question that was answered, and we had discussion in the chat with Professor Osei Asare on the wedge between the farm gate and the wholesale, and you mentioned that the traders sort of charge a lot in terms of the margins, and I'm wondering, is there a competition between the traders in your country, and what is the structure of trading sector in the country?
Thank you very much, Prof. Yes, the traders more or less are competing. They are. And you know, from the books, when we say perfect competition, information must be there, all those things must be working. Buyers and sellers, they all have information, but on the ground, it is not the case. You see, so because the farmers are also diverse, and in some cases, these traders are the ones who also pre-finance these farmers. The farmers are so resource poor, so they need some funding before they start the production. So some of these traders are the ones who fund them, they pre-finance it for them. So when they produce, they harvest, and they go according to the terms, our traders again will cheat the farmers, because if I don't buy it, who's gonna buy it? It will rot. So yes, they are competing, but that competition is not any keen competition, because they can move elsewhere to purchase from the farm gate. As I talk with you now, in the northern part of Ghana, farmers have cultivated rice. They have over several metric tons, and they don't have buyers. In fact, it's paddy rice, not yet processed. They don't have buyers. So any trader who goes there will dictate the price, and they now decide how much profit they want to make. So the traders are more or less competing, but that competition is not keen enough to let them market, the forces of supply and demand, to really work. It's not working.
And the farmers, are they able to observe the prices? How the pricing information is channeling along the value chain? Is there information available on the prices, on markets available? How does it function?
It is now catching up. Some private sector companies or businesses are providing market information on price transmission, prices in the various markets, both at the farm gate and at the wholesale in the towns and cities. They provide that, they make that available, and they utilize their mobile phones to send the messages, not Android phones, but through the USSR, then they send it to them. Yes, but hardly do these farmers utilize it. Hardly. Because I know that in town A, it is the price is good there. I must still get my transport, carry my goods there. And that is still a problem for them to pay. They don't have the money to even take their goods to the next town. And it gets worse when they go there and they are not able to purchase all their commodities. They must carry it back at another cost. So the farmers prefer it if the trader comes to them where they are. But unfortunately, it's the trader who is also dictating to the farmer. So our resource poor peasant farmers or subsistence farmers are really vulnerable. They are vulnerable to the dictates of the middlemen, the middlewomen. And this has been so for a very long time. It has been so. So market information is coming out, yes. Companies like Isoko, they even provide weather information to the farmers. They provide prices, farm gate prices for various commodities, but the farmers are still handicapped even utilizing it. That is the challenge here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, again, if anyone would like to add to the topic, which would be more related to their country, please feel free. If there are no additions or comments, there is another question from the audience to Dr. Bankole. asking what are the main issues for conflict and whether the farmers face landmine challenges as in Ukraine.
Okay, main issue for conflict is grazing land. Okay, it's between the herders and the farmers. The herders take their cattle through the farms. There should be a grazing route, so to say. And over the years, those grazing routes have been overtaken by the rich elites, okay, which they have used to build certain other things. And the herders must feed their cattle. So just drive their cattle into people's farms and those will destroy it. So, and then you then have these conflicts, farmers, and then the herders will come back to retaliate, and then it's ongoing. And it's like there's no end in sight. Okay, recently, in the last regime of the government regime, there was the proposal to create settlements for herders in all the 36 states of the Federation. But of course, Nigeria is divided into 6 geopolitical zones, and geo means there are different cultures. And there's the fact that when you create herd farm settlement for some set of people who are, they are Nigerians really, but then in terms of being the, I mean, that they don't originate from such areas, and then there's a fear of domination in the future and what can become of such lands. And that proposal was killed. It was dead on arrival, okay? And then the herders, because they also want such proposal to sail through, they continue their attacks on the farm. So the way we have to go through that, and there's a new government now, and that proposal has also come on the table again. It's been discussed. So the cause of the constant conflicts is because the herders want food for their cattle. The farmers want, having planted and spent money on their farms, they want to sell the farm products and also make profit. And then you have cattle destroying everything. So that's a constant conflict, and the government doesn't know yet how to deal with that. Some parts of the country, southwest, there's now a realization that even the settlement for cattle was part of its development a long time ago, even though that was destroyed because of the onset of oil. But now that we have this problem, whether this is an opportunity also to go and rejuvenate that idea and create community cattle ranches. Now, in terms of personalization, I think the ideas are just being generated. It could be that when the herders, because they are nomads, they just move from once there's what they call dry season, bring the cattle to the south, because the south is rainforest. Okay, but in doing so, they destroy farms and it creates a never-ending conflict. So if the elites come around this particular issue to create the ranches on their own, they have been prodded by governments, which majority of people or citizens think it's influenced by some influential northerners, the Fulani headsmen they are called, okay? Perhaps it will be accepted, okay? But once it's coming from that angle, it is like we are trying to plant the seed of domination in the future of a particular tribe over the other. So there's a lot of political economy issues even surrounding that type of resolution. But that is the main cause, herders and farmers conflicts in the country.
Thank you very much. I can see that we have approached almost the end of our webinar. I would like to give an opportunity upon the will, of course, to each of the speaker to comment or add anything to the discussion. Well, if there are no more comments and I don't see any other questions from the audience, at this point, I would like to thank wholeheartedly to our speakers and as well to our audience who have attended and asked questions today. We are looking forward to continue the discussion and the cooperation to getting to know about each other's countries and where we could do mutually beneficial cooperation. Thank you again, and I wish to everyone a peaceful and quiet rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and my
Bye-bye.
other colleagues. Thank you all
Bye.
for coming. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Maria and Pablo.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you,
Bye.
Maria, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.